Okay, great. When you get those pulled up, I will say welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm going to kick this off right now because our first speaker has another webinar that he needs to attend tonight. So Gary Wingfield is a program analyst in recruitment for the Office of the Chief Component Human Capital Officer. Recruitment is responsible for working with cadres, regions, and program offices to assist with ever-changing hiring needs, planning and attending hiring and recruitment events, as well as partnering with colleges, universities, organizations, and associations. Gary is an alumni of High Point University and comes to FEMA with a wealth of experience, including higher education, public relations, marketing, media, and firefighting. He is going to give his presentation, and then if we have time for any questions, he will take them, but he needs to leave at 8:25. So if there are any remaining questions, you can email them to me, and I'll compile them all, and I will send them to him. So Gary, I'll kick this over to you, and you can get started.
Thanks, Jen. I want to first thank Penn State for having me. I really enjoy giving information. What I found out in doing presentations like this and going to different events is people know about FEMA, but they don't know about FEMA. So being able to convey this information is extremely important. First and foremost, our mission is pretty simple: helping people before and during after disasters. This was kind of boiled down because before we had a longer mission statement, but I think this mission statement captures the essence of what FEMA does. As far as our organization goes, we're up under the Department of Homeland Security. As you can see here, some of the other agencies that we have: the Coast Guard, Secret Service, TSA, CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, Citizens and Immigration Services, ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So FEMA plays a part in the bigger picture of DHS. These are some of our numbers. We're currently working on getting the 2018 statistics, but as you can see here, lots of employees and very diverse from what we have. And as you see here on the regions aspect of it, we have 10 different regions, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later. As far as right here, as you see the regions, really one of the really cool things about FEMA is that we do have 10 different regions, and they're all across the country. And Pennsylvania is in Region 3. Region 3 is one of the regions that I work closely with, and the region office for Pennsylvania is in Philadelphia. But as you see here, it's all across the country: Alaska. Some of the territories that we have are the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, Guam, and some of those territories. As far as location functions, headquarters is where everything comes from. So as you see here, we're setting policies, developing procedures and guidance, and that's where everything is formed. Whenever there are disasters, there are also big meetings that occur at headquarters, and then those policies and procedures are funneled down to the regional level. And as I told you, with 10 different regions, we have 10 different regional offices, but also in those regions, we have other areas that will be set up for disaster-specific functions as well. As far as the field goes, the field is extremely important and what we refer to as the boots on the ground. So these are reservists, which I'm going to go into a little bit later, our reservist program, but also emergency management duties and responsibilities that other employees have. So we have a specific employment type called IM Corps, and they are deployed primarily, I want to say about 70% of the time. And so what they do is they go from one disaster to another. And when they're not at those disasters, they're based at home, and that home can be anywhere because they're going to get deployed at some point in time. As far as our mission, as far as this goes, another really cool thing is that every single employee has a regular and recurring emergency management responsibility. And I can speak to that firsthand. I first got to FEMA about 2 years ago, and that was right when all of the hurricanes happened. And so I was deployed to Carson City, Nevada. And I know what you're thinking, what was going on in Carson City, Nevada? Well, it wasn't a direct disaster location, But what was going on is they were responding to a previous disaster, and they were actually going to shut that down. And they ended up building it back up because of all of the hurricanes, the successive hurricanes that we had. And what I was doing there, I was responsible for hiring customer service representatives and supervisory customer service representatives. And those were the individuals that would be on the phone handling phone calls from disaster survivors. And in doing that, I was deployed for about 37 days. And after that, like during that time, I want to say in a 2-week period, I worked around 160 to 163 hours. And even though they were long hours and long days, it was extremely rewarding. And I was there and I was helping people that were going to be helping people. And then also once I got home from that deployment, when I was gone for 37 days, I came home for about 4 days and I was deployed again to the U.S. Virgin Islands on a special project. While in the U.S. Virgin Islands, I was on St. Thomas and St. Croix, and we were doing hiring events because that was actually a directly impacted disaster location. So while I had 2 different deployments, there were 2 different stories. In Carson City, Nevada, I wasn't dealing with people that were directly impacted. And then when I went to the U.S. Virgin Islands, there were people that were directly impacted by that. And some of the disaster survivors that I met them and all they had was what they were carrying when I met them in the employment commission. As far as when disaster strikes, it has to be declared a disaster by the president. So once a disaster happens, it's signed off by the president, and then FEMA is able to come in and help out. A misconception that I have when people have about FEMA is that they expect FEMA to be a first responder, but we're not. And as much as we would like to come in and help as soon as a disaster happens or an emergency happens, we do have to wait for it to be declared and signed off by the president. As far as the response goes, a lot of coordination going with different resources on the federal level and on the state level and the tribal level as well. And these are some of the really important points that we're trying to drive home, but also help out when we're responding. As far as the recovery goes, these are some of the things as far as individual assistance, which would be what I talked to you about with the customer service representative portion of it, being on the phones, providing information, providing assistance. The public assistance aspect of it is more so kind of the engineering and the structure and helping with the mitigation and things like that. And of course, community recovery. It could be something with disaster survivor assistance, which are individuals that work in those cadres in those areas, potentially going door to door, passing along information or registering disaster survivors on iPads. As far as employment, FEMA is awesome because it's not, as I like to say, it's not if you fit in at FEMA, but where you fit in. And as you see here, these are some of the employment types that we have, not limited to this list, but a wide range of anything from an attorney to logistics to external affairs, emergency management specialists. It's just a wide-ranging array of employment types that we have. And again, I work with people that have varying experience. I've met people that have had their law degree, and I've had people that have had biotechnology degrees and everything in between. So again, as I say, it's not if you fit in at FEMA, but where you fit in. Some of the employment types that we have, FEMA is unique in that aspect. One of which is permanent full-time, and this is usually what people tend to think about when they talk about not just FEMA but federal employment, is permanent full-time. And permanent full-time are the competitive portion. And what I mean by competitive is that veterans' preference does come into play. So a veteran and a non-veteran are applying for a permanent full-time position. The veteran will receive that preference as far as that goes, and that's why it's competitive. And then also that second paragraph, after 1 year of continuous service, permanent full-time employees gain competitive status, and then after 3 years of continuous service, permanent full-time employees are hired through the competitive process, gain full career status. So that's what's different with the other employment types that I'm going to go over. Another employment type that we have is called core. And CORE stands for Cadre of On-Call Response and Recovery Employee. And CORE isn't competitive. So a veteran and a non-veteran are applying for a CORE position. Veterans' preference doesn't come into play. And then also with CORE, it's on an appointment basis. So the appointment is either between 2 years and 4 years. After that appointment is up, it can be renewed, but it just depends on budget, work performance, workload, just a variety of different factors. Lastly is the reservists, which is our on-call workforce. And reservists are the boots on the ground, as I referenced on a previous slide. So what happens is, as a reservist, you're in queue. And when you're in queue, you would get a deployment notification. Once you get a deployment notification, you have between 24 and 48 hours to respond to that deployment notification, and then you'd be sent to a disaster location for at least 30 days. It could be more, but it just depends on the severity of the disaster. And then also reservists are assigned to a variety of different cadres, anything from logistics to operations. We have a legal cadre, and we have a lot of different cadres. So again, as I said earlier, it's not if you fit in, but where you fit in at FEMA. Some of the development opportunities that we have: the Presidential Management Fellows Program, and this is for candidates with advanced degrees, as you see, master's, doctorate, professional degrees, and students that are about to graduate or have graduated within the previous 2 years. Also, our internship program, it is a paid internship. I will say that with the internship program, it does happen once a year, and usually what ends up happening is they look for the summer interns in the late fall. So for the summer of 2020, they're going to be looking for internship applications around late fall, so look for that. And the same goes with the Presidential Management Fellows Program. We do have a student volunteer program, which is unpaid, but also a really good experience. When I'm speaking with students, I'm always encouraging them to get involved with internships, because an internship is a win-win situation. So you have an idea of what you want to get, and you're very passionate about that field. And if you're doing an internship, you go to the internship, and one of two things happens. You go, and it's everything that you imagined, and you want to continue on this path. Or you can get in there and realize you kind of want to change directions. So you wouldn't have had that opportunity if you didn't do an internship. So it's really important for not just the internship, but to do student volunteer or volunteer options if you want to get in those fields, because it gives you that real life experience and will help you make those decisions as far as continuing on. Another one is FEMA Corps, and FEMA Corps is also a really good program, and they serve on 10-month terms. And FEMA Corps works in the field, and they're working with these cadres, they're working with program offices, and again, they're getting to travel and getting that real world experience that is very, very important, especially in any field, but especially emergency management. As far as compensation, that's also what people want to know. How much am I getting paid? Well, we're on the GS scale. And with the GS scale, I pulled up Pennsylvania, and the salary will change depending on location, but these are some of the salaries as far as the GS level. If you are applying for a core, which is a temporary full-time opportunity, you'll see IC, and IC mirrors the GS scale. It's just the coding of it. So if you see IC7, it's the same as GS7, and so on and so forth. So don't be scared away when you see that coding when you're applying for a temporary full-time position, because it's the same, it's mirroring that GS scale. As far as how to apply, I know I've heard such affectionate terms used for USA Jobs as the black hole. And another really great thing that I like to do is kind of to soothe the trepidation that people have about USA Jobs. I know sometimes it can be a bit confusing, and that's why I like conveying this information. As far as our positions go, they're on USA Jobs, so you can search for permanent, full-time, core, and sometimes we have reservist positions listed. And then also we will have from time to time positions listed on our careers website, but that careers website that we have will direct you back to USA Jobs. And a really good thing about USA Jobs is that it streamlines everything. So as far as permanent full-time, there are going to be two different categories for that. One category is merit promotion, and those are usually for individuals with veterans preference, military spouse, some of those designations. And then they have a DE, which is for the public, and the DE allows everyone to apply. But again, if there's that veterans preference, veterans will get that preference when you're applying. And I know sometimes people get frustrated because they've applied and applied and applied for positions and they haven't been referred, or they might have been referred, but they didn't end up getting it. I just say be patient and follow the process. A lot of times that veterans preference is coming into play. And that's also why CORE is a good option if that's something that you're willing to consider, because it's not competitive and it's a good way for you to get into the federal system, but also to understand kind of the process and how things go. So CORE and reservist positions are not competitive, but permanent full-time is. As far as how to apply, it's really important when you're looking at a job announcement. All of that information is going to be there. If you can, as you look here on the left side of this, it says who the job is open to. If you see the public, then anyone can apply. If you see that veterans preference or military spouse or Schedule A or anything like that, those are just for those individuals. And then the job announcement itself will summarize all of what the job is. And then also what's really important, especially on this slide, is making sure that your federal resume speaks to the job that you're applying. I know a lot of times, especially with private sector, what ends up happening is you have a resume and you set it and you forget it. But it's different with the federal resume, because when you're looking at a job announcement and you're looking it over and you see specialized experience, your antenna should go up. What I mean by that is the human resource specialist is looking for the resumes that have that specialized experience. What tends to happen is when you've been doing something for an extremely long time, we tend to forget some of the things that we're doing. What I encourage all candidates and students and individuals to do when they're preparing their resume, especially their federal resume, is to really be fair to yourself and portray yourself in the best light, because sometimes with you forgetting that experience, you might jar it loose once you're really combing through all the things that you've done. Because it's even happened with me. If I've been doing a job for a really long time, I forget some of the things that I did. But the human resource specialist is looking to make sure that specialized experience is in the resume. So people tend to think that a machine, or we send resumes in and they're scanned, but actual physical real live people are looking at resumes. And if your resume doesn't have and it doesn't display that specialized experience and you have it, it's like you don't have it. So if the human resource specialist doesn't see it, then you're not going to be considered qualified or having an opportunity to go to that next step. As far as some of our resources that we have, we use LinkedIn a lot and we post jobs there. Sometimes we post best practices. And what we'll do is we'll post a job on LinkedIn, but then again, it'll send you back to USA Jobs. And so it's also a good way to engage, because I know I've engaged candidates if I was working with a program office or a region on looking for candidates. I've engaged individuals on LinkedIn as well. We have Twitter and Facebook. They're used a bit differently. Twitter and Facebook is so for the broader and general information of what we have, but still a good way to engage with our population via these social media platforms. Lastly, a really good resource is careers.fema.gov, which is what will have all of the cadres for each of the reservist areas that we have, as far as the breakdown of permanent full-time and CORE and all of that really good information. So I encourage you to look around the website, especially if you're interested in being a reservist, because what it'll have is it'll have hide and show, and it'll show you all of the qualifications for each reservist category. And then you can kind of look at your resume to see what experience you have if you're interested in the reservist program, and see what you want to do and see what direction you can go into. And then also our email addresses as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Gary, that was excellent. Thank you very much. This is Gene Langridge. So just a comment and a question. So our program, our master's program, for their capstone experience, they tend to write a scholarly paper. So I guess one thing is to make you aware that we have this group of students who are sometimes don't have topics, and I'm just wondering if there's ever a way that we could engage with FEMA to get topics that they might be interested in having a student choose to look at. The second question is there one type of course or experience outside of the internship, of course, but is there one type of course that you would think students should really try to get in their master's degree?
I would say, well, for the first part, that's a great question. I haven't had that question before as far as the engagement for the capstone topic. So what I'll do is I'll take it back and see if we've done that and provide you with an answer. Secondly, on that, as far as a course, I would say there isn't really one course. I would say to be as well-rounded as possible, a really big aspect of it is incident management. So that's really good to have, and that's one of the overlapping themes that I've seen in a lot of different areas is that. But it also depends on the student and which area they want to go into. So I can't really say that there's one specific course that would do well or that all students should have. But I would say a really good one would be incident management, because that gives you a really big picture of what goes on and all of the different moving parts of a disaster location or an emergency type situation. Because I know we went over that when I was a firefighter.
Okay, good. Yeah, we do have a good incident management course that's very popular with our students, so that's good to hear. Jen, that was my immediate questions. Does anybody else have questions?
If you've got a question, there's a raise hand button in the chat box. Okay, I don't see any. And like I said, I will be available to coordinate any questions that come in after, either that people tonight have or that people who listen to this presentation have later. Gary, it's 8:23, so we hit your time limit right almost perfectly. So I just wanted to say thank you again for speaking to us tonight, and I will definitely be in touch with some of the questions that come up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Gene. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do this again. It was, again, a pleasure to be able to provide information. And don't hesitate if you have a question to reach out to me, and I'll do my absolute best to answer it and get those answers.
Well, we appreciate it, Gary. Yeah, and our group is on LinkedIn too, so we try to bring people in and connect them that way as well. So good. Thank you.
Okay, very welcome. Have a great rest of the night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.